Backstage has described Beehive more as a musical review than a jukebox musical. So, talk about that a little bit. Either one of you, Tim, Dakota, what is the format of the show? How would you guys describe it?
I really think that the show could go either way, depending on who's directing it or who's producing it, because it definitely hints at a few very famous icons from the 60s, and if you chose to physically embody those icons on stage, then I think it would have more of that jukebox feel. It doesn't kind of have any of the origin story that a typical jukebox musical will dive into. And with that in mind, I think it was important for us, the whole production and creative team going into this, that we really did present something different than a typical jukebox musical and go more towards the review style. Because I think this show is structured in a very fun and fresh way, that you have these 6 women who are just celebrating the music of that time, and it becomes less of how close can you get one person to look like Janis Joplin or Aretha Franklin or whatever. And that also really puts a lot of constraints on casting, because you're sadly trying to find lookalikes rather than just the most engaging, charismatic people who are going to connect with each other and with the audience. So we put ourselves in that more like review track so that we could have this eclectic, charismatic mix of these 6 women who all sound incredible, who have a great chemistry together, and who kind of, like I said before, just celebrate this music and invite the audience along to kind of remember when they first heard these songs, whether they grew up in the 60s or whether their parents listened to them in the car all the time. You get to just kind of like sit back and not have to focus too hard on like what the story is that you're supposed to be following, or where these people came from. It's a little more like easy breezy and relaxing.
Yeah.
And Tim, you're coming from the experience with Million Dollar Quartet, so you're no stranger to telling stories about iconic musicians.
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
what are the challenges in bringing stories like that, like this one, to the stage and presenting, I don't know, kind of an image of people that we think we know so well, or music that we think we know so well?
Yeah, it definitely is a challenge. My first experience with Million Dollar Quartet was actually here at Theatre Raleigh, and we took that production down to Cape Fear and Fayetteville as well. And then I've since worked on the national tour of that production as well as a few others, and one coming up as well in Virginia. Yeah. But it is challenging, as you just mentioned, because you want to do justice to these real life people, and some of which in that show are extremely famous, like Elvis or Johnny Cash, and so you want to get the best people in the room that sound incredible, that have the acting chops, that have the training and the stamina to make it through a run of a show, but you also want the audience to have that payoff, that they're kind of coming in the room to see what Elvis Presley might have looked like a little earlier on in his career, what he might have sounded like. So it can get really tricky to kind of walk that fine line. But it's become something that I really enjoy doing, and there's a small group of people that play these roles over and over and over again for these jukebox musicals. Same thing goes with Jersey Boys or with Beautiful Now and that kind of stuff. So there's a small collection of people that you kind of dip into and choose from anytime you're working on these productions. And every once in a while you find a new person. The guy that we had on our tour was fairly new to the role of Jerry Lee Lewis, so you can find some diamonds in the rough and kind of bring them out and teach them the material for the first time, and can be pleasantly surprised. But it does come with its own challenges, which I think, again, why this was so freeing, because we just got to walk into the room and these ladies got to decide who they were. They get a first name. Each girl has kind of their character has a name, but there's not a lot of background information. So it's kind of a blank slate, and we got to decide what story do we really want to tell with this music, and various perspectives that each lady has on the material that they're singing.
So Dakota, who do you play in the show, and what has this experience been like for you?
So I play Allison. Again, it's just kind of like a first name situation, and then everything else is determined by the music. But this show has been incredible for me because I got to do a whole bunch of research into a time period that I knew a little bit about, but not anything like I did while I was working on this. And I have had a blast learning this music, and especially because of the environment that Tim has set up, playing in the world of this. And yeah, like, what is my version of, the Ronettes? Like, what did I feel like when I sing that song? All that kind of stuff. And that's been an absolute joy and a pleasure, because I feel like you don't often get that kind of freedom and that play within a lot of other musicals. It's usually scripted and
Well, and especially within the world of the jukebox musical, because we're always telling, or it seems like in a lot of jukebox musicals, you're telling stories of famous people.
Totally. Yeah.
So
yeah, I guess in that way, kind of, we're like the everyman a little bit.
Yeah.
Like we're your experience, where we have the same experiences that hopefully our audiences were having with those songs and that time period and what was happening.
It's really fun too to see the ladies as they're like learning the music, whether you again grew up in that time or had just heard the song on the radio or your parents loved that music or whatnot. You always funny you get to a song and it's like Can't Hurry Love is one of the songs that you sing, and you're going through and you're singing along, and then you're like, oh, I didn't realize that's what the actual lyrics were. Or
Right,
like,
yeah.
Oh, this is the music that I'm actually supposed to be singing, not what I've always just hummed along in the shower
Made
or
up my little
whatnot.
jam.
So yeah, and the arrangements are really beautiful because these songs were written, whether it was a two-person backup group or whatnot. We have 6 women who were basically on stage the whole entire time. So there's these gorgeous arrangements of each song that make it still exactly what you remember of the song, but a little more like special and a little more theatrical, which I think is why we step into the theater for these kinds of moments.
And Dakota, I have not heard of this before, or I haven't heard of too many other performers doing this, but when you got this role, you made a donation to Youth Empowered Solutions. So tell me a little bit about that. How did you get involved with that organization, and why them? Why with the show?
Yeah. So when I kind of, like I was saying, when I started doing my dive into the history and research and all that kind of stuff, I started noticing that there was this common thread where a lot of the movements, a lot of the demonstrations and the protests were all done by the youth and by students, especially around the Vietnam War, and how they were kind of marching forward, and they were the voices that were pushing a lot of these things. And as I was doing all that research, Youth Empowered Solutions came up. Thank God for Google. Google is like, you're looking at, you're going to Raleigh. We see you're going to Raleigh, and like you're also looking up all these like youth movements. And this is a not-for-profit that believes that the youth have a unique voice, and they have things that they want to say, and they deserve an opportunity to have a platform for that. So they create a platform, and they give them the tools and the resources to share their ideas and create change. And I was like, this is 100% what they were doing in the 60s. This is what the students were doing. And here we are today in 2019, and these kids are doing it. And if you go to their website, there's incredible little stories by some of the students that are doing it, and it's incredible. I mean, they have a unique view on what's happening, and they have creative ideas that, because I didn't grow up when they did, they've got a better view of different things. And seeing that a not-for-profit was giving them the tools and the resources to speak to people and to say, hey, this is something that's happening in my community or in my school that I don't agree with or that should be different, and letting them use the power of their voice to make change I was like, yes, yes, please, I want to support them. And I felt like, because I was in Raleigh, it's my turn to use my platform, my little bio, to support these voices that are trying to make change here as well. So that's how that all happened.
And why are we so fascinated, whether it's Mad Men or the music, why are we so fascinated with the 60s? It just seems like that throwback decade that when you want to feel good or inspire change or talk about change,
Right.
that's the decade we look back to. Why are we still so fascinated by it?
I mean, I think on a very like surface level, I think things like design and style will kind of always, come back to different periods, and we're definitely going through like a moment where mid-century modern is like such a thing, and so I think that nods directly to Mad Men and those kinds of things. So you don't have to walk very far to walk into like a furniture store or whatever and
Right,
see
yeah.
things that are very inspired or sometimes taken like right off the shelf
Totally.
of like my mother's house that she grew up in.
I have black go-go boots right now.
Yeah.
They're suede, but
Totally.
they're definitely black go-go boots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think there will always be that. And then I think socially, we're definitely going through a time that, just talking through some of the moments that come up in the show about what was happening in the 60s, it just seemed like everything was kind of turned on its head, and there was such a divide. There was so many passionate feelings about what was happening here in the United States and around the world. And I think you can't help but feel that today, no matter what, no matter where you stand
Yeah.
socially, politically, anything like that, you can't help but feel some of those same feelings. And so I think that there is a little bit of, I don't know if comfort's the right word, but you can associate it with
Yeah.
the fact that you're not the first person feeling these feelings or going through these
Yeah.
these moments in history, and there's something there to kind of look back and know that like this has happened before, and hopefully
Right.
we've learned something. Hopefully we come out on a better side.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's hard. It's hard for me to talk about because this does feel like the first time that I'm
Right.
going through it, coming from
Yeah.
from the generation that we come from. So
Yeah, I think we look back on, and especially when I was doing the research, I was like, oh, this has all happened before, because I grew up in the generation where like the Women's March was like, oh, this is huge and this is new, and it's like, oh no, this hasn't happened forever. So that's my ignorance. So I'm learning, but yeah, there's something super inspiring about the change that happened then and how it was created and how people went about it. And I think that we, as a generation on all sides, are looking for ways to make things better for everyone.
Mhm.
And I think that the 60s was a time where people were experimenting with how to do that, and how to stand up for yourself and how to speak up for what you believe in. And so I think, yeah, we're excited by looking back at other rebel raisers and other people that were talking about and bringing up ideas of change that we're still trying to do now. I think it's exciting, and I think that's why I find it enthralling. And I went down a whole Gloria Steinem rabbit hole when I was doing this, and I was like, oh my god, I want to be her best friend. But stuff like that, there are people from that time period that are inspiring still today with what they have to share.
And I think day one we had a great conversation. We focused most of the rehearsal on just kind of talking about our own personal ties to the music or the stories that are told within the show. And our cast and creative team there's a large generation kind of swath of people.
Yeah.
And so it was great because everyone had a different kind of attachment or association with the music, the material, the words that are said. I think yours is delightful, and that you felt like this show is so representative of your parents. And I think, and to see you kind of come to this new appreciation, understanding of what they were going for, kind of step into their shoes.
Yeah.
She was putting on some costume pieces the other day, and she was like, my mom is gonna die.
Literally, I'm like, I've seen pictures of my mom wearing very similar things. I'm like, oh, she's gonna come into the audience and be like, what is happening?
Well, and do you feel like, I just interviewed somebody a few days ago, and she was putting on a damn Yankees costume for Fosse Verdon, and she said, when I put on that costume, I look like my grandmother. So do you feel like you're kind of channeling those women in your family?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Because my mom and my dad were very, very active in this time period, and they both, you know, they both strayed so far from both of my grandparents into this, you know, kind of wild world a little bit. And yeah, I feel like I get to step into that, especially with the one that you're talking about. Like I get to step into, I don't know, and an actor's brain, like I get to step into her reality and maybe what it was like and the challenges and things like that and the joys. But yeah, it's fun.
Kind of your Back to the Future moment. I love that.
Absolutely.
And the wild thing about the show, like that in of itself, I think could be a whole entire show. But I think what is really special and exciting for our audience is that the show, you know, covers 1960 to 1969, and so you get just little quick glimpses of all of these different points and everywhere in between, and I think it makes the evening move really quickly. It's kind of like you're, you know, on a runaway train, as you experience all of this fantastic music and also the quick little things that were happening socially, pop culture, politically around that were influencing the music that was coming out at that time. So it really does come in like nice little like vignettes and little glimpses, and you bounce right along, and suddenly the evening's over.
And you wonder, what happened?
Like, more music. I would like more music, please. And then you can just come back the next night and enjoy another night with us.